Welcome back to Narrations. Tonight's story is messy, self-aware, funny, and quietly comforting. A rom-com about being imperfect in a world that constantly tells you to do better. Bridget Jones's Diary isn't really about finding the perfect man. It's about learning to like yourself while you're still figuring things out. This is the story of Bridget Jones. Bridget Jones begins the year talking to herself. Not out loud, not usually, but constantly. Her inner voice narrates everything. What she eats, what she drinks, what she should have said, what she definitely shouldn't have said, and what everyone else probably thinks about her. It's relentless, sharp, funny, and exhausting. She writes it all down. The diary isn't a dream journal. It's a coping mechanism. On the first page of the year, Bridget makes resolutions, ambitious, emotional, deeply human promises to herself. She wants to lose weight, drink less, smoke less, stop embarrassing herself, stop obsessing over men who don't call back, stop measuring her worth by external approval. She wants to become someone who has her life under control. Not glamorous, not perfect, just together. Bridget is 30-something, single, and very aware of it, not because she's ashamed, but because the world won't let her forget. Every social interaction feels like a status update she didn't consent to give. Family gatherings come with well-meaning interrogations disguised as concern. Friends talk about partners, weddings, babies, milestones, and Bridget smiles while quietly calculating how far behind she feels. She lives alone in a London flat that represents independence and isolation in equal measure. Some nights, it feels liberating. Other nights, it feels painfully quiet. Her evenings are a mix of television, wine, and self-commentary that swings wildly between confidence and self-loathing. Bridget is not unhappy all the time. That's the complicated part. She's funny, warm, social, capable at work. She has friends who love her, parents who care, a life that functions. But underneath it all sits a constant hum of inadequacy, the feeling that everyone else received instruction she somehow missed. The diary becomes the only place she doesn't censor herself. She records her calories, cigarettes, drinks, not out of discipline, but self-awareness bordering on self-punishment. She records crushes, hopes, humiliations. The pages are chaotic, emotional, honest. They are Bridget unfiltered. The year officially begins at a New Year's party hosted by her parents, the kind of gathering Bridget dreads in advance. It's full of familiar faces, polite smiles, and subtle judgment. This is where life updates are exchanged and compared, whether you want to or not. This is where she meets Mark Darcy. Mark is not charming. He doesn't sparkle. He doesn't flirt. He doesn't soften his edges to make others comfortable. He stands awkwardly in an ugly sweater, observing rather than participating, clearly out of sync with the social energy of the room. Bridget notices him immediately, and not fondly. There's something about Mark that unsettles her. He seems to see too much while saying too little. When he makes an offhand remark about her habits, smoking, drinking, weight, it lands painfully. Not because it's devastatingly cruel, but because it echoes the criticisms Bridget already whispers to herself. She decides instantly. He's judgmental. Arrogant. Not for her. Mark, for his part, is awkward around Bridget in a way that reads as coldness. He doesn't know how to express interest without retreating behind reserve. And Bridget interprets his distance as disdain. They misread each other perfectly. If Mark represents everything Bridget fears she might be, awkward, judged, unchosen, then Daniel Cleaver represents everything she wants to be. Daniel is her boss. He's charming, witty, effortlessly confident. He flirts like it's second nature, making Bridget feel interesting without trying too hard. He emails late. Compliments casually. Remembers details that feel intimate. Daniel knows how to make Bridget feel seen. And that feeling is intoxicating. Bridget tells herself to be cautious. She writes warnings in her diary. She pretends to be cool. But inside, hope blooms recklessly. The attention validates parts of her that have been starved for reassurance. Daniel chooses her. And for Bridget, that feels like proof. Their relationship ignites quickly: playful emails, flirtatious banter, stolen moments at work. Bridget feels lighter, more confident, more alive. She starts imagining a future not because she's desperate, but because things finally feel easy. Too easy. Daniel avoids seriousness with humor. He keeps conversations just vague enough to avoid responsibility. He promises excitement without stability, affection without accountability. Bridget notices and ignores it. Because she doesn't want to be that woman. The one who asks for clarity too soon. The one who ruins things by needing reassurance. She convinces herself that wanting more makes her needy, and neediness, she believes, is unlovable. So she adapts. She becomes quieter. Easier. Less herself. Meanwhile, Mark Darcy drifts in and out of her life. Awkward encounters, moments where his presence feels gentler than she expected. Bridget hears rumors about him. That he's cold, unpleasant, difficult. She believes them without question. Because they fit the narrative she already wrote. As Bridget invests more emotionally in Daniel, her self-criticism intensifies. She overanalyzes messages. Replays conversations. Checks herself constantly, monitoring behavior, as if love is something that can be optimized if you don't mess up. The diary entries grow more frantic. More honest. More vulnerable. Because beneath the humor, something real is happening. Bridget isn't failing at love. She's failing herself, slowly shrinking to fit what she thinks will make her chosen. And she hasn't yet realized that the story she's telling herself might be wrong. Daniel's betrayal doesn't arrive like a shock. It arrives like confirmation. Bridget doesn't find out all at once. She senses it first: a shift in tone, a distance disguised as charm, inconsistencies she's trained herself to ignore. When the truth finally surfaces, it lands not as surprise, but as something she already knew and refused to name. Daniel never intended to choose her. Not fully. Not honestly. The revelation is humiliating in the way only emotional betrayal can be. It isn't just that Daniel lied, it's that Bridget adjusted herself to accommodate the lie. She defended him. Excused him. Blamed herself for wanting clarity when what she was given was ambiguity. The relationship collapses quickly after that. There's anger, yes, but beneath it is something heavier. Grief. Not just for Daniel, but for the version of herself she bent into shape trying to keep him. The version that laughed things off, stayed quiet, pretended not to care when she very much did. Bridget spirals. She drinks too much. Smokes more than she promised she wouldn't. Cancels plans, then regrets canceling them. The diary becomes frantic again. Pages filled with self-criticism, humor sharpened into armor, honesty bordering on cruelty toward herself. But something else happens too. She survives. She goes to work. She shows up. She lets herself be sad without pretending it's fine. For the first time, she doesn't immediately replace disappointment with another fantasy. She sits with it. And in that space, Mark Darcy begins to look different. Bridget runs into Mark again, awkwardly, inevitably, and this time, she's less defensive. Less busy performing. Mark speaks plainly, clumsily, but sincerely. He doesn't flirt. He doesn't flatter. He tells her things without embellishment. Including the truth about Daniel. Mark reveals that Daniel has a history of infidelity, not as gossip, but as fact. He doesn't deliver it with satisfaction or cruelty. He simply believes Bridget deserves honesty. And suddenly, Mark's earlier comment, the one Bridget took as judgment, feels different. Not kind. But not cruel either. Bridget begins to see Mark not as someone who judges her, but as someone who sees her clearly and still stays in the room. That realization unsettles her. Because being truly seen is more vulnerable than being admired. Mark's affection isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. He doesn't compete for her attention or try to win her over with charm. He respects her boundaries even when it costs him closeness. And that consistency begins to matter. Bridget notices the contrast. Daniel wanted her to be easy. Mark wants her to be herself. Still, Bridget doesn't rush into anything. She's tired of narratives that promise fulfillment if she just does things right. She begins questioning the story she's been telling herself, that love is something earned through perfection, that worth is conditional, that being chosen requires constant self-correction. The diary shifts. The tone softens. Not because Bridget feels better, but because she's less interested in punishing herself. Mark eventually tells Bridget how he feels. He does it awkwardly. Imperfectly. With honesty that lacks polish but carries weight. He tells her he likes her. Just as she is. Not as a line, not as reassurance, but as statement of fact. Bridget doesn't know what to do with that. Because she's spent her entire adult life believing that being herself is the thing she needs to fix. The turning point comes quietly. Bridget realizes she's been waiting for love to grant her permission to like herself, when it was never supposed to work that way. She begins choosing differently. Speaking up at work. Saying no without apology. Letting herself be visible without constant self-editing. And then Daniel returns. Of course he does. Charm intact. Apologies vague. Promises implied but never articulated. He wants Bridget back, not because he's changed, but because she's familiar. Comfortable. Safe. This time, Bridget sees it clearly. She doesn't argue. She doesn't justify. She doesn't negotiate. She walks away. Not angrily. Decisively. That moment matters more than any romantic declaration that follows. Because Bridget chooses herself first. Only then does Mark step forward again, not to rescue, not to convince, but to meet her where she stands. Their coming together isn't dramatic. There are no fireworks, no grand gestures. Just understanding. Respect. And the relief of not having to perform anymore. Mark doesn't complete Bridget. He stands beside her. And that makes all the difference. Bridget Jones's Diary isn't about finally getting the right man. It's about stopping the internal war long enough to recognize that you were never broken. Sometimes the love story isn't about who chooses you. It's about who you become when you stop trying to earn it. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this narration, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.